My name's Simon Thompson and I'm the Senior Hedgehog Officer for Warwickshire Wildlife Trust. And I'll introduce you as well to Debbie Wright, and Debbie is the new Hedgehog Officer specifically for rugby and our project area that we've just launched over that part of the county. So this evening we're going to talk to you a little bit about hedgehog biology and ecology in general, what hedgehogs are, what they do and why they do that, and then I'll move on to talk about our project that we've been running over in Solihull, and then Debbie will move on to talk about our plans for rugby and what we'll be hoping to achieve there in the coming year. Okay, so I'll leave you with Debbie.
Okay, great. Just a bit of housekeeping, I suppose, to start. If there is a fire, which hopefully there will not be, our meeting point is the car park. Also, if you do need the toilets, they're just up here, just around the corner. And please do help yourselves to tea and coffee throughout the evening. You don't have to put your hand up or anything, you can just go wherever you want. Okay. So, to start, just some basics really of hedgehog ecology. I don't know how much you all know about hedgehogs, but it's always good to have a bit of background on their biology. So our hedgehog, or what's known as the common hedgehog, is quite widespread over Europe, as you can see on the maps here, and across the UK. Found in a variety of habitats, except maybe coniferous woodland, moorland and more upland regions where it might not get as much food. So, it's our only spiny mammal, about 5,000 to 6,000 spines potentially on an adult hedgehog, and very much well loved, a charismatic animal, as I'm sure you know, which is probably why you're here. Lots of folklore to do with hedgehogs, traditionally in cartoons, Tiggy Winkle, etc. Voted our national species back in 2013, I think it was, in the BBC Wildlife magazine. So much loved. Signs that you might have a hedgehog in your garden. If you're lucky enough, you might find some footprints, but you're probably unlikely to get them as clear as that. You might also see some hedgehog poo, which is quite distinctive because of the food that it eats. And you might also hear some of the characteristic snorting, snuffling, loud hedgehog noises that people associate with them being in hedges and bushes. So the reason its poo can be quite distinctive is because it often contains the remains of insects and invertebrates, basically what it eats. So hedgehogs like to eat beetles, caterpillars, also earthworms, those are the main constituents of its diet. Also will eat things like slugs and snails, carrion even, sometimes birds' eggs, and other items. Can be quite eclectic, but essentially mainly invertebrates and insects. So in terms of the life cycle of a hedgehog, around about now, springtime, between April and June, we've seen our hedgehogs emerging from hibernation. So they're hungry, so they're feeding a lot. And May time, about now, coming up, they're thinking about mating. So you may have already heard hedgehogs mating, they can be quite loud. And I've had reports of that happening now and in the last couple of weeks. And yeah, they're basically just mating ready for the summer when the hoglets will be born. So normally you have about 4 to 5 hoglets, baby hedgehogs, in a litter, and I'll probably see those in about the beginning of June time-ish. And they're pretty much independent within about 6 weeks. So it's quite a fast cycle for them before they begin to disperse about. Hoglets are actually born without any spines, and they come through within a couple of hours. They start to come through. So in the autumn, somewhere between September and November, we do sometimes see some late litters, a secondary litter. Often they have difficulty surviving because they may not have put on enough weight to get through the winter months. So sometimes hedgehogs, if they're a bit low on weight, can be looked after by hedgehog carers and fostered over the winter period. During this time they're generally feeding to fatten themselves up, ready for the winter when they go into hibernation. So hedgehogs are true hibernators, along with things like dormice and bats here in the UK. They do occasionally come out of hibernation and go and get some food, but essentially they'll spend most of the winter sleeping. Although given our very warm winter that we've just had, that may not have necessarily been the case for as long. So hedgehogs tend to make nests, and they can make quite lightweight summer nests. Sometimes the males will just sleep in long grass, for instance, They make more substantial nests if, for instance, it's a female who's having a litter, or also in the winter when they're going to hibernate and they need to keep warm. So here are some examples of nests. They often can make them out of deciduous dead leaves, so it's really helpful to have those in your garden and not tidy them away. You can also make a hedgehog house in your garden if you want. So this can be made from something as simple as a cardboard box, but you can get more elaborate ones and you can make your own, and you can make them out of wood, preferably untreated. And this can provide an area for your hedgehog to go to. You can put bedding in it if you want, something like hay, but often they'll just drag their own leaves into it, sometimes take out the hay that you put in there in the first place. You can also set up a feeding station if you so choose in your garden, and this can be made from just, again, something as simple as a box. So it could be an upturned plastic box that you cut a hole in to enable the hedgehog to get in, and you put the food and some water underneath it. And this can stop other things getting in, if you've got, say, lots of cats in your area, for instance. Hedgehogs can eat meaty cat and dog food. You can actually get specific hedgehog food for them. So for instance, we sell some in the shop, Spike's hedgehog food. It's essentially poultry based. So you can put all sorts in there, really. Unfortunately, our hedgehogs are suffering quite a big decline at the moment. So in the UK, it was thought that in the 1950s we had over 30 million hedgehogs, and now it's thought that we've got under 1 million. So they're disappearing quite fast at that rate. So back in the millennium, it's thought that we had quite a lot more hedgehogs, where they've experienced up to a 30% decline in urban areas and up to 50% in rural areas. And unfortunately, a very recent stat is that almost half of British people haven't actually seen a hedgehog in their garden. And that's quite obvious when you go to events and you talk to children, because they often have never seen a hedgehog and are actually quite scared sometimes by the prospect of a hedgehog. The figures really vary, and it's really hard to tell the amount of decline, because you sort of rely on baseline data and then new sets of data coming in all the time, which is based on different studies. So for instance, surveys of mammals on roads and things like that. So it can be really hard to estimate the numbers. Some of the estimates are lower, but essentially what we're seeing is that hedgehogs may well still be quite widespread, but they may be thinner spread than they were before. So the reasons for hedgehog decline are quite complicated. Unfortunately, there's not just a single factor that we can put it down to, target, and really make an impact just through that. There are multiple factors, and often they're interacting. So one of the factors is habitat loss. So I'm sure you're all aware, particularly in the changes in farming practices that have happened in the last few decades. In particular, our removal of hedgerows, which are really important shelter and linear habitat for hedgehogs to travel through. So we've lost a lot of that. Also, our farming has become quite intensified, and that has reduced some of the food supply for our hedgehogs too. And that's without all our building and development that we've actually done to take away habitat for hedgehogs and many other animals as well. Also, our increase in pesticide use. So again, that is limiting the food supply for hedgehogs as well as sometimes poisoning them. Injuries. Hedgehogs are injured by, for instance, when we strim in our gardens if we've got long grass, or mow the lawn and we don't realise that hedgehog is actually nesting within it. So there are quite a lot of injuries that happen that way, so please do check your areas, or if you've got a compost, before you put that fork in there, think that there might be a hedgehog inside. So you get quite a few injuries. Interspecies interactions. So badgers do get a bit of a bad rep for many things other than hedgehog decline. Hedgehogs are pretty much the only natural predator of hedgehogs here in the UK, mainly because their claws are longer than hedgehogs' spikes and spines, so they can actually get to the hedgehog. But if you think about it, hedgehog is quite a tough meal. It's not an easy game. And it's actually probably more likely the fact that badgers like the same food as hedgehogs, so for instance earthworms, so they're a competitor in that way. So sometimes badgers can affect populations of hedgehogs locally, particularly if you've got high badger density, you might find that you've not got as many hedgehogs hedgehogs. Nationally, it's probably not as much of a problem. And you can get hedgehogs where you've got densities of badgers as well. So it's certainly not the only factor that's contributing to their decline. There are more complex interactions probably to do with badgers, and that's often the case in rural areas. So badgers might be better able to cope with removal of hedgerows and more open spaces because they're less exposed, for instance. So you might see more of an impact of badgers in rural areas potentially. So that relationship is complex, but it's certainly not all down to an increase in badger numbers. I'm sure you've all seen hedgehogs squashed on the road. Sad sight. Does give us an indication of where they are in their distribution and where they're crossing over. And so that data is still valuable for us to know if you do see any roadkill. But roads don't always just directly impact hedgehogs by killing them, but also fragments their habitat. So habitat fragmentation is a big problem for hedgehogs, particularly in urban areas where we're seeing increased development, increased transport links, and you're just getting pockets and pockets of habitat that are getting smaller and smaller and unable to sustain healthy hedgehog populations. So you can often see this with newer developments, particularly where you're getting concrete barriers and fences that are impenetrable and they've got no gaps underneath them or within them, and hedgehogs simply can't get through. There are some other problems as well. So climate change, so whether or not you believe in global warming, I don't know, but with an increase in CO2 emissions, this is potentially going to change the climate over the long term, which might affect, say, their availability to get food, things like that. Also, disease. Hedgehogs do suffer from having parasites and other diseases, which again could be impacted by climate change and different temperatures as well, and different interactions with other species, and rehabilitation problems as well. So sometimes hedgehogs can be taken in to be rehabilitated under good pretenses, but maybe they might actually get immune to antibiotics, for instance, if they don't need antibiotics but they're given them anyway in those situations, or they might be released in the wrong areas, or they could spread disease if you've got different hedgehogs together. So that can be a problem that we need to be aware of. So this is a map of central Rugby. I'm not sure if any of you recognise it, but you can see Caldecott Park near the top there. And this is just to illustrate some of the habitat fragmentation problems that can exist for hedgehogs. So you can see railway, big roads, lots of streets that are divided with some terraced housing in particular actually, where you can see they can't really get through. It's quite a difficult habitat to travel through. Hedgehogs can travel several kilometres per night in search of food and mates, and they need, say, 20-30 gardens even to get through. So if they're facing these barriers, it is a problem for them. In terms of the legal side and the protection that hedgehogs afford, I won't go through it all, but these are the main things that you need to be thinking of. Essentially, it's illegal to kill or capture or harm a hedgehog. It's illegal for you to be cruel or mistreat a hedgehog as it is for other mammals. And the hedgehogs have been listed as a BAP species, a British Action Plan species, Biodiversity Action Plan species, sorry. So we do actually have a local BAP plan here, as do other areas of the UK. So essentially we want to try and take action to help our hedgehogs. But we may want to help, but when it comes down to the law, there's not actually a legal obligation to protect our hedgehogs or their habitat. So there is a petition at the moment to try and get hedgehogs listed under Schedule 5 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act, and this would mean that they do have some protection, and that, for instance, developers may need to survey and mitigate for impacts to do with hedgehogs if they've got them in their area that they want to develop on. So the Parliament petition, I think the last time I checked, was something like 35,000 signatures so far, around about that. Needs 100,000 by August if it's going to get to be debated in Parliament. So rally the troops, guys. Okay, so we are trying to tackle hedgehog decline here in Warwickshire, There are various national schemes that we'll mention as well throughout today, but now we're going to talk to you a bit about what we're doing in Warwickshire. So,
thank you. Yes, so myself and Debbie are actually a bit of a rare species ourselves because we're hedgehog officers, and there are only actually 3 of us in the entire country, myself, Debbie, and another chap called Henry, which is probably the best name for a hedgehog officer, I think, far better than Simon or Debbie. Henry runs a project called Hedgehog Street, which you may have heard of. That's administered by the People's Trust for Endangered Species. So Henry's job really is to look at the national perspective and even the European perspective on hedgehogs, what's going on at those larger levels, whereas me and Debbie are very much focused here in Warwickshire. So Warwickshire's quite lucky really to have so much focus on a single species. I'll talk to you now about Warwickshire Wildlife Trust's background with hedgehogs, how we've got to having 2 hedgehog officers here in our county. So in 2013 we launched a campaign called Help for Hedgehogs, and the idea behind that campaign was to raise awareness of what was going on for hedgehogs and begin to raise some funds as well so we can get some feet on the ground and begin to do something about the declines that we were seeing. So the Help for Hedgehogs campaign really aims to work with absolutely anyone who would get involved with us. So this is a group of people who work at a company called X-Media in Coventry. They make installations for exhibitions, and they actually use the offcuts of their woods to make hedgehog boxes for us that we were then able to distribute through schools, raising awareness of the problems that hedgehogs are facing. You can see snuffles as well there. We didn't bring snuffles along this evening. We tend to save snuffles for the talks to 6-year-olds. It goes down a tree. We have a running team, the road hoggers, who go out running, trying to raise money and again raise awareness for hedgehogs across the county. And that's my former boss Ben there in Snuffles. At the Tunnel Brewery we have our own beer brewed called Hazy Hog. Again, trying to get the name of the hedgehog out and about in the county. So as part of our campaign we came up with a 10-point plan. The idea really behind this is to tell people the 10 simple things, 10 simple steps that they can all take to try and help hedgehogs. The first of those is to leave a green mess in your garden. We talked about habitat loss in the rural environment, but habitat loss is everywhere. Even in the urban environment, our gardens have changed massively in that time scale between the 1950s and now. We all tend to rake up our leaves and put them in the green wheelie bin, and then the council will come and take them away. But wildlife needs that green mess. If we can leave it in our garden, it does wonders. Log piles as well, really, really important. As the wood starts to decay, beetles and insects move in, which is perfect hedgehog food. And the logs also provide a really great space for hedgehogs to build nests underneath. Ponds. Hedgehogs are actually quite good swimmers, but they do struggle to get themselves out of ponds. They can and do drown in garden ponds, so where possible, if you can build a ramp or some steps, just to make getting out a lot easier. Check before mowing, Debbie's already mentioned. They will sleep in grass, so they're really, really vulnerable to cutting machines. This happens as well, not just in gardens, but at a contractor scale in the wider environment. So a lot of people that are working with hedgehogs up and down the country are lobbying their councils to make sure that the local contractors are aware to be checking for wildlife when they're cutting larger areas of green space. Bonfire night goes without saying. Please do check your bonfire if you're having one before you light it, because essentially that's just a great hiding place for a hedgehog. Try to avoid using sub pellets, pesticides and chemicals generally. Obviously it's removing food source for hedgehogs all the time. And a lot of these poisons that we use in our gardens are generalist. They'll kill pretty much everything, not just the slugs, so really great to avoid them if we can. Number 7, I think, is probably the most important. Link your garden. Hedgehogs really do need a big area to roam across to find enough resource. So if you can get gardens linked back together, fantastic. You can feed your hedgehogs. Debbie's mentioned that as well. Cat food, dog food, you can buy special hedgehog food. They'll eat pretty much anything. Again, if you are feeding them in your garden, good to think about doing it at certain times of the year. In the spring and the autumn, that's when they need it most, and always provide fresh water for them as well. They really, really, really benefit from having fresh water to drink. Try not to disturb during hibernation. So the months of November till April, if you know that you've got hedgehogs nesting in the garden, those are the months to be extra careful around that patch of bramble or whatever it is you've got where hedgehogs are nesting. This is usually by no means one period of continuous sleep. They do wake and rouse. And on a warm year like this year, some hedgehogs haven't even hibernated at all. But knowing where hedgehogs are and knowing to be cautious around those areas is really vital. And 10, you can donate. And you've all donated your time this evening to come and listen to our hedgehog talk, so thank you very much. Okay, so after a year-long appeal, so until about 2014, we managed to actually collect over 1,000 sightings of hedgehogs up and down the county, which was great. So that was our map in 2014. You can see lots of dots all over. Each dot's a hedgehog that's been recorded. We seem to have hotspots where there are lots of hedgehogs, and also areas where there are far fewer hedgehogs. This all directly correlates to where people are. If you look at Coventry, you can almost see the concrete centre there, where the concrete middle of Coventry is the centre. And as you move out to the suburbs, where most people are living, spending their evenings, you start to build up hedgehog records. And then in these more rural areas where there are far fewer people about at night, stumbling home from the pub at 2 a.m. to come across hedgehogs, you appear to have hedgehog-free areas. Doesn't necessarily mean there aren't hedgehogs there, but it certainly means there are no people there looking for them and sending us the information. Hedgehogs are massively under-recorded, so when we came to start looking at hedgehogs as a project, we had very, very little data. So in that 1 year period, those 1,000 sightings that we collected actually accounted for over 3 times the total number of records we had for Warwickshire in the last 50 years as a whole. So a little bit of effort, going out talking to people about hedgehogs, trying to get information, we actually amassed a large bank of data very, very quickly. I know that some counties up and down the country still have very, very little data. So can't really express enough how important it is to submit any sightings that you do have of hedgehogs. It's really, really great to know where they are, and we'll talk about how you can do that a bit later on. So from there we decided to move on to a more active project, the Hedgehog Improvement Area in Solihull. The idea really behind that was to help people to make a difference. So by helping them to survey for hedgehogs, by going out and engaging with communities, and by making improvements in those habitats to actively go and make a difference. Okay, so why did we choose Solihull? Well, do any of you know Solihull at all? It's quite an interesting borough. The orange section at the top here is widely known as North Solihull for obvious reasons, and it's interesting. A lot of the housing in North Solihull is extremely dense. A lot of it is council housing or former council housing, and it's built in these grid-like patterns. It's really quite interesting. You can see there's little green spaces in between with rows and rows and rows of gardens. So from a hedgehog's point of view, it looks like perhaps quite a good landscape to move around. Everything's joined together by lines, which is quite interesting. And if you zoom in further, you can see that actually all the gardens are at the front of the houses. You can see here. They've all got open access. So in terms of a landscape for hedgehogs, it's actually quite good. Lots of areas that hedgehogs can move around. So in areas like North Solihull, the problems that we're trying to deal with aren't necessarily the way the habitats join together, but more like the quality of that habitat. Most of the green space here is just grass. There's nothing else. There's no diversity. And with a very low diversity in plant life, you have a very low diversity in invertebrates, hedgehog food. So in these areas, what we're trying to promote is wildlife gardening, making sure people are doing the right things in their gardens to encourage wildlife to be there. We also have some pretty dreadful areas for hedgehogs in Solihull. So this grey section through the middle, this is Birmingham Airport and the NEC. Really large-scale industrialisation, so very, very little for hedgehogs there at all. You can see there's some areas of woodland here, but these are completely cut off from any of the broader landscape. I mean, you can see there's no way that a hedgehog's going to successfully find food in this concrete jungle. So really isolated pockets of habitat which are not great for hedgehogs. And then across this western area, quite different from the first picture. Really, really large gardens, far fewer houses, all built into these rings. So the problems in a lot of these areas is the continuity of the habitat, the connections. A lot of these gardens will be walled or really, really strongly fenced to keep the pets in. So in these areas we need to be talking to people about getting those gardens connected back together and joined up. So different problems in different areas of the borough. It makes quite an interesting project site. So one of the major problems that we've come across in Solihull in this project is the idea of habitat fragmentation. Now this can happen at a large scale or it can happen at a very, very local level. If you consider a block of houses like this, the lines are fences, the red blobs are the houses. You can see we've got a hedgehog at the top here. As it stands, all these houses are completely fenced in. So all of this habitat through the middle, this whole block, is inaccessible to the hedgehogs. They just can't get there, there's no way. This person here actually likes hedgehogs and they've decided to cut some holes in their fence. They've cut one here, and one here. So now what can happen is that the hedgehogs can move into the gardens and spread through. Now Mrs. Jones, who lives in this house here, is really good friends with Mrs. Smith, who lives down here, and she's convinced Mrs. Smith to also cut some holes in her fence, which is great. So Mrs. Smith's gone and done it, and she's got a hole here, here and here. What you can see is that actually, although she's done that, the hedgehogs can't get there. There's no routes for the hedgehogs to move through the environment, and this is what we see time and time again. A lot of people will come to me and Debbie and say, our garden's really hedgehog friendly, we've got holes all over the place, which is great, but unless your surrounding neighbours and your surrounding habitat is similar, you're never going to get a hedgehog into that garden. There's simply no route for them to travel to get there. So one of the main things that we're doing is trying to encourage people to open up that landscape, to talk to their neighbours, talk to all the people that connect to their garden to try and get that landscape reconnected together. And that happens very, very locally. You can see here, this is a picture from Solihull, and almost this entire chunk of green space here is ringed in by these houses. These are semi-detached houses, but between all the houses are garages, which actually connect the houses back together. So there's no route for any ground-dwelling wildlife to get from the street through to the gardens. There's simply no access at all. So it really relies on this edge here, where the school is, to make sure that there's connections that go from the park here, through this street, through the school grounds and into these gardens. And if those connections don't exist, there's no way that any wildlife that lives on the ground is going to be able to access these gardens. So these are the problems that hedgehogs are facing in urban environments. Massive areas of potentially great habitat simply cut off. And this happens at a landscape scale as well, so motorways, canals, railway, simply dividing the habitat into 4 distinct areas that are inaccessible between each other in an environment like that. And we're particularly bad in this country at thinking about wildlife on a landscape scale. So green bridges, green tunnels, for instance, we're particularly bad at building them, which is a real shame because they make a massive difference. Okay, so here's our hedgehog map for Solihull. You can see North Solihull here, quite a few records, which is fantastic. Similarly through these areas, and we're starting now to get records coming from more rural areas as well, which is fantastic. So lots of work going on to try and get areas connected and people to send in records for us. So the Hedgehog Improvement Area projects have really got 3 key concepts. The first one is community engagement, so going out and talking to people, letting them know what they can do, how they can help. The second is citizen science, so asking them to do things for us, to record their hedgehogs. We use a really neat method to look for hedgehog footprints. We use plastic tunnels, and inside we put some hedgehog food. We paint some ink, which is made from charcoal powder mixed with vegetable oil, on some masking tape strips, and then we leave a piece of paper either side of those ink strips. All slides inside the plastic tunnel, and we leave it out overnight. Hedgehogs smell the food, go into the tunnel, get ink all over their paws, and then leave us a really nice trace of footprints. So we can prove that hedgehogs have been in an area without us having to be walking around all night long with torches shining them into people's gardens. So this is the method that we use to detect hedgehogs, and it works really, really nicely. Obviously, if you think back to that map we had before, if we have one of these in one garden, that's great, we can tell whether the hedgehog's in that one garden, but what we really need to know is how those gardens are joined together and which gardens the hedgehogs can move through to get to that one tunnel. Because in an urban environment, really, you need one of these tunnels in every single garden to be able to show where your hedgehogs can get to, unless you can map that connected landscape. That's one of the problems that we're facing. So after we've asked people to survey for us, we talk to them about how they can improve that habitat. So chopping holes in fences, little holes in gravel boards, tunnels underneath fences, all to connect the landscape and let hedgehogs back through, giving gardening advice about the right things to be planting to help native wildlife. And this works really well because you find that if people don't have hedgehogs, they really, really want to get hedgehogs. So they're quite willing to open up their gardens and talk to people nearby to try and encourage them to do the same. It's great. So another big part of the project is education. So I spend a lot of time in schools talking to children, and they use the tunnel methodology as well, and we give them training sessions on how to run a hedgehog survey in their school grounds. So we'll leave a survey tunnel with them, and we'll leave them with an infrared camera so they can record exactly what's going on in their school grounds as well, which is brilliant. It's really great to see the children thinking about wildlife, thinking about their school playing field, not just as a playing field, but as a habitat. It's really great. They often make a display with all the footprints that they've found, teaching them about working scientifically as well, recording their findings in a scientific way. It's a really interesting part of the job. Okay, so one of our main focuses in Solihull is the ward of Elmdon. This is Elmdon here, I don't know whether any of you know it. It's quite interesting for us. It's got some large areas of green space. This is Elmdon Park here. really, really big park, and that park alone should be able to maintain a viable population of hedgehogs. We've also got a few more green spaces. There's another park here, and then this great big grey thing through the middle is Jaguar Land Rover. Huge Jaguar Land Rover plant, which really carves up that landscape. We also have our own nature reserve, Elmdon Manor, which is just in this section here. So lots of things going for it as a habitat, and also some things which are less good. The park's got its own force of volunteers, the Elm Park Support Group. And there we go, Jaguar Land Rover carving up that landscape. So it's really interesting. On the face of it, it looks like it could be a great habitat for hedgehogs. We've got lots of areas of green space. We've got gardens running in between that are hopefully well linked together. But when you start to look at it, we find this ring structure again, almost entirely enclosed groups of gardens. And this is typical of this, certainly this north section of Elmdon, really, really bad fragmentation problems. And again, it's these semi-detached houses with blocks in between, so there's simply no access front to back. So that sort of led us on to the question, if there's no access in that way, what availability of green space is there at the front of houses? Because front gardens can be just as good for hedgehogs as back gardens if they exist. We put lots and lots of our hedgehog tunnels all over Elmdon. You can see here the blue dots are tunnels which didn't find any hedgehogs, and the green triangles are tunnels which did. So you can see there are very, very few green triangles on that map. There's a couple here in the housing, there's a couple here on the edge of this park in the housing, but all of those tunnels in the park have got absolutely no green triangles, all blue dots, so no hedgehogs at all were found in the surveys of Elmdon Park last year. Similarly down here, this park, absolutely no hedgehogs found, which is really, really interesting. There could be lots of reasons for that. One of those reasons could be simply that this park is a bit of a green island. We've got Jaguar Land Rover to the south, completely blocking off any movement of animals that way. You've got the A45 directly to the north, so again a big barrier to hedgehog movement. And then this housing, if it's in rings and not well joined as we think it is, then again it's completely blocking off any hedgehogs from using those areas of green space. So lots more investigation to be done about exactly what's going on. So we started looking at front gardens as well. There's a little map here that shows the percentage of houses on streets that have got absolutely zero green space. So the redder the colour of the line on the map, the worse the garden really. And you can see most of those gardens are lying in this 30 to 40%, 40 to 45% colour. And actually, if we look at it purely in terms of the houses, almost 30% of the houses in Elmdon have got no green space at the front of their house at all. They're completely tarmacked or gravelled over or block paved over. All of those gardens, when they were built, would have had gardens at the front. None of them would have had drives. So we've lost 30% of that habitat by people tarmacking or gravelling over the front of their gardens. So a massive loss of habitat for hedgehogs, particularly if we can't get to those back gardens. So what we're trying to do now, we've looked at front gardens, is do a survey of back gardens, which is really, really hard to do because front gardens you can just walk around the street with a nice map and draw all over, but back gardens is difficult. So we're going to be doing a leaflet drop in targeted streets within Elmdon to ask people to map their back gardens for us so we can get that data, find out where these connections are and begin to build a much more detailed picture of what is going on for hedgehogs in suburban areas. So that's really the next target of the project in Solihull over the coming months, because it's really important that we do understand exactly what's going on. Brilliant. So that's the story for Solihull, and now Debbie's going to talk to you about our plans for rugby.
Okay, so we're at the really early stages of the rugby project, as I'm sure you know, probably from the title of this talk, introducing the rugby project. I've only been posted for about a month. But essentially, the first question that I've been asked is, why rugby? Why are we moving our hedgehog improvement area and expanding it into rugby? Why not somewhere else? So first point is that when we've been doing our Help for Hedgehogs campaign and asking for sightings, we've got just over 400 sightings for rugby. So it seems like there are hedgehogs there. We've got a population of hedgehogs in rugby to start with, which gives us some baseline to work with. Also, there's quite a lot of local support throughout the borough. So Rugby Borough Council have been really, really supportive so far. They've been putting out posters for us for quite a long time, asking for sightings now. They like to be involved in our events. They've been dropping hedgehog houses at schools. all sorts of events to raise awareness, basically. And then there are the people of Rugby that have been coming to us with their hedgehog sightings and wanting to know what's going on. Lots of groups, lots of businesses, garden centres, that kind of thing. So we've already got quite a lot of support going on in the borough. Another reason for choosing Rugby is that there's a lot of development that's due to take place in Rugby, as I'm sure some of you will know. So it is due to get a lot bigger in size with some pretty big developments across the borough. And what we want to do is make sure that we keep the hedgehogs that are there and that we don't lose them. And it provides an opportunity for us to look at what happens when we undergo development. Also, the housing in Rugby is quite different to some of the housing in Solihull, so it gives us a chance to look at a different type of landscape. And there's a lot of rural area as well as the urban area in Rugby. So you can see on our sightings map over there, I'm not sure which button it is, the laser.
On the back. Just pull the back, make a little trigger. Yes.
So you can see here, this is the centre of Rugby, so you can see kind of the more concrete centre like we saw before in the other map. But then you can see we've already got some rural sightings around here, and quite a lot down in the south of the city and down Dunchurch Way. So it provides an interesting opportunity for us to look at a different kind of landscape. And what we'll be doing is a similar hedgehog improvement area project to what's been going on in Solihull. So the first branch of it will be, again, community engagement. So I've already started out with this. Been on the radio launching the project and in various local newspapers trying to get the media involved, raise awareness, get people knowing about the project in the first place, often the first hurdle that you face. Talks like this one I'll be doing a lot of, again raising awareness. We'll be doing a lot of events in Rugby, so this one was our launch event in Caldecott Park just last week. Very good turnout, partly due to the fabulous weather I think that we had. And that was really good because we got a lot of families on board as well, and some people specifically came to see us if they knew we were going to be in the park. Also going to schools a lot, so Simon previously mentioned the education work that he does, so we're doing a lot of that around Rugby. And putting out the news about the project on social media and our website, and using that as a base so that people can find out what's going on and how they can get involved. Which kind of brings me on to the next point, citizen science. So you can log a hog, you can log a sighting on our website, or also by letting us know. We still want to know all your sightings, regardless of whether they're just in Rugby, across the whole of Warwickshire. And also, we'd like to know if you have seen a hedgehog that's a bit unwell. Basically, you can ring the British Hedgehog Preservation Society, who are our funders. So this is basically the first stop if you see potentially injured or poorly hedgehogs. So hedgehogs, as a general rule, are nocturnal. They don't like to be out in the day. They shouldn't really be out in the day. If you see a hedgehog wandering out in the day, it's likely to be a bit poorly. So you can call the hedgehog hotline, as I like to call it, and they'll give you some advice on what to do. So also we'd like people to get involved in surveying, like Simon said, about using hedgehog tunnels. So we'll be looking for people to have tunnels in their garden, find out where we've got hedgehogs and where we haven't. And also we'll be lending out some remote cameras if people would like to use those as well. And the final branch of it is the habitat improvement side. So a large amount of the focus, particularly in urban areas, will be getting people to make their gardens hedgehog friendly. And by making them hedgehog friendly, as a general rule, you make them wildlife friendly. So it's really great for us to be able to do that and to give people the advice on doing that. So Simon covered a lot of the points in the 10-point plan, of which we do have some at the back if you want to take some away with you. Things like keeping some leaves in a bit of mess, an area for them to nest in, materials to use, log piles, avoiding injuring them with streamers, those kind of things. Also ramps in your ponds, you can make sure that there's no netting that's low down that they might get caught up in, and just generally making your garden a bit more diverse, as well as connecting it up with the other houses in the street. Mentioned before a bit about hedgehog houses. so you can provide an extra shelter for a hedgehog in your garden. And in terms of connecting it up, you can often just make holes in your fence like Simon discussed. They just need to be about the size of a CD case. And if you've got those throughout your whole street, then your hedgehog should be able to travel far and wide, and that's what we want to see. So you can sign up as a hedgehog champion at Hedgehog Street, which we mentioned before, a national campaign. And this basically means that you can go around talking to your neighbours and telling them all about hedgehogs at important times of year and providing information on what they can do to help. So hopefully you can get your neighbours involved if you'd like. Other ways to get involved in a project, you can sign the petition, I mentioned this earlier. Hopefully we can get some 100,000 signatures, you never know. You can donate, we also mentioned this earlier, you can donate anywhere you like basically. You can text, do it online, send us an email with details, phone us, whatever, we'll tell you how to do it. Also you can follow us online on our website or on social media, Twitter and Facebook, we've got pages for them. And you can find loads of information about hedgehogs on the British Hedgehog Preservation Society website. So they've got lots of leaflets and information for you if you'd like to look at that. So that's about it on our introductory talk. Let us know if you've got any questions.